In 1933, a quarter of all Americans had no job, no paycheck, no safety net, but they survived. Some even thrived. The methods they used have been almost completely erased from memory. Number 14 on this list was so profitable that entire industries were built to destroy it. Number 3 created a black market economy worth more than some states' entire budgets. These 20 forgotten ways of making money required no boss, no office, no resume, just grit and the kind of desperate ingenuity that modern America has trained out of us. Before we start, hit that subscribe button because some of these might actually change how you think about work. Let us count them down. Number 20. Collecting rags and bones. Before the recycling truck existed, there was the rag and bone man. In cities from Boston to Chicago, men and women walked the streets with hand carts or mule-drawn wagons, calling out for old clothes, animal bones, scrap metal, and paper. Textile mills paid cash for cotton and wool rags, which they shredded and then spun into new fabric. Bones went to glue factories and fertilizer plants. A good rag picker in the 1890s in New York could pull in $1 a day, roughly $28 in today's money. Enough to feed a family of 4. Immigrant neighborhoods in the Lower East Side ran on this economy. Women sorted rags by fabric type at kitchen tables, while children hauled sacks through back alleys. By 1900, an estimated 25,000 people in New York City alone earned their living from waste. The city's sanitation department eventually pushed them out, claiming the streets as public property. But for decades, rag picking was the first rung on the economic ladder for families who had nothing else to stand on. Number 19. Selling apples on street corners. When the stock market crashed in 1929, the International Apple Shippers Association had a surplus problem. Their solution was to sell crates of apples on credit to unemployed men at $1.75 per crate, roughly 60 apples, which could be resold at 5 cents each. Within months, an estimated 6,000 apple sellers lined the sidewalks of New York alone. The image became the defining photograph of the Great Depression. A man in a worn suit, his hat pulled low, standing beside a wooden crate with a hand-lettered sign that read 5 cents. Some sellers earned $2 or $3 a day in good weather, enough for rent in a boarding house and a hot meal. Others stood for hours in freezing rain and sold nothing. Cities tried to ban them, and business owners complained they blocked storefronts. But for a generation of men who had lost everything, that apple crate was the last shred of dignity between them and the breadline. Number 18. Taking in boarders. Before apartments had leases and landlords ran credit checks, ordinary American families opened their spare bedrooms to strangers. By 1900, census records show that roughly 1 in 5 urban households took in at least one boarder. In mill towns across New England, a widow with 3 empty rooms could earn enough from boarders to keep the house. She would cook breakfast and supper, wash linens on Mondays, and collect rent every Friday. A single room in a Pittsburgh boarding house cost between $2 and $4 a week in the 1920s. The arrangement was so common that architects designed homes with separate entrances for boarders. Children grew up sharing dinner tables with steel workers, traveling salesmen, and school teachers. The practice quietly disappeared after World War II, when suburban mortgages and zoning laws made it illegal in most residential neighborhoods. We regulated away one of the oldest survival strategies in American life. Number 17. Gathering and selling wild ginseng. Deep in the hollows of Appalachia, families dug ginseng root from the forest floor and sold it to buyers who shipped it straight to China. The trade stretches back to the 1700s, when fur traders realized that American ginseng fetched extraordinary prices in Asian markets. By the 1870s, dried ginseng root sold for $3 to $5 a pound at trading posts in West Virginia and Kentucky, a fortune. When a coal miner earned $1 a day, entire families spent September and October in the woods, children spotting the distinctive red berries while parents carefully dug around the roots with hand-forged tools. A single season could earn enough to carry a family through winter. The knowledge passed quietly from generation to generation. Which ridge had the oldest plants? Which northing slopes held the biggest roots? Overharvesting and habitat loss have made wild ginseng increasingly rare, but in remote mountain communities, the tradition persists. Diggers still walk the same hollows their great-grandparents walked, searching for the route that connected Appalachian poverty to a market on the other side of the world. Number 16. Selling homemade food door to door. Long before food trucks and Instagram bakeries, women in every American city cooked food in their kitchens and sold it on the street. In the 1920s and the 1930s, black women in the South baked sweet potato pies, fried chicken and pound cakes, then carried them through neighborhoods on trays balanced on their heads or packed into baskets. In Mexican-American communities across Texas and California, women sold tamale from pushcarts, earning enough to pay rent when their husbands could not find work. A plate of tamale cost 10 cents. A whole pie sold for 25 cents. These women ran businesses without storefronts, licenses, or bank accounts. Their only advertising was the smell drifting down the block and the word of mouth that followed. Health departments eventually cracked down, requiring commercial kitchens and permits that most home cooks could not afford. The cottage food industry that thrives today is really just a return to what American women were doing a century ago, before regulations made feeding your neighbors a crime. Number 15. Harvesting and selling ice. Before electric refrigeration, ice was one of the most valuable commodities in America. Farmers in New England, upstate New York, and the upper Midwest spent winters sawing blocks of ice from frozen lakes and ponds, packing them in sawdust, and storing them in insulated ice houses. A single farmer with a good pond and a strong back could harvest enough ice to earn more than his crops brought in all year. By 1880, the ice trade employed over 90,000 workers and shipped millions of tons as far south as New Orleans, and even to the Caribbean. The pay was backbreaking but reliable. Ice cutters earned between $1 and $2 a day, and the work came during the dead of winter when nothing else could be done. Families depended on that income to bridge the gap between harvest and spring planting. When mechanical refrigeration arrived in the early 1900s, the entire industry collapsed within a generation. Lakes that had supported whole communities went quiet, the ice houses rotted, and one of America's great seasonal economies vanished as if it had melted. First pattern break. Here's where things get interesting, because the next few entries were not just forgotten, they were deliberately buried. Number 14. Taking in laundry. For nearly a century, washing other people's clothes was the most reliable source of income available to American women who could not leave the house. In the decades after the Civil War, formerly enslaved women in the South built an entire economy around laundry. In Atlanta in 1881, washerwomen organized a massive strike, with 3,000 women demanding a uniform rate of $1 per dozen pounds of wash. It was one of the largest labor actions in the post-Reconstruction South. The work was grueling. They hauled water, boiled it over open fires, scrubbed fabric on washboards until their hands cracked and bled, then hung everything to dry and pressed it with heavy, sad irons heated on the stove. A washerwoman in the 1890s might handle 30 to 40 lb of laundry per customer per week. But she set her own schedule, worked from home, and answered to no foreman. When automatic washing machines became affordable in the 1950s, the profession evaporated. Millions of women lost their primary source of income, and one of the most significant